Recently I saw season 4 of The Witcher show on Netflix and my computer literally died. So a week later and a bunch of money short, we have to talk about it. Actually, I also watched the standalone Rats movie, which came out at the same time. Originally I had planned on covering them separately, but the film is essentially an additional extended episode of season 4, and I'm already late, so I'll just bundle them up in a single video. Alright, where do we begin? The old Geralt is gone, so how does the new one measure up? I know the general consensus is that Henry Cavil is better, and honestly, it's true. I do miss him. I think I mostly miss his face. You know, his facial expressions. He felt more emotive somehow, as if he could show more with less effort. Maybe it's because he had these more expressive eyes, which especially when combined with the yellow contact lenses, stood out and drew a lot of attention. But above all, we know how passionate he was about the world of The Witcher and the character of Geralt, and it showed. It rightfully made him quite appealing to many of us, myself included. I recall when the first season was announced, I wasn't terribly excited about Henry Cavil being Geralt, but over time, he grew on me. Now, Mr. Hemsworth is not terrible either, he just does not stand out very much. I've heard some people say that he's a totally different Geralt, but I'm not so sure. The show is certainly not trying to take the character in a completely new direction. The way he looks, the way he fights, the way he speaks, all of it tries to be rather similar. And sadly, both versions of Geralt are often written in an unfortunate way. Additionally, as it was in the previous 2 seasons, Geralt is once again overshadowed by Yennefer. She gets a brand new and heroic plot, where she starts at a low point, but she earns trust.
Thank you for coming.
She gathers allies.
Thank you for coming.
She changes minds, even that of Philippa Eilhart, and manages to unite the divided sorceresses and ultimately to lead their final stand against Vilgefortz. While Geralt can't even travel halfway from Brokilon to Nilfgaard. Remember season 2, where he crossed half the world overnight? Well, not anymore. Also, why does he even need to go there if Yennefer can just teleport right next to Emir's bedroom? But anyway, my point is that the relatively lower screen time and significance of Geralt, combined with the way he's written, basically do not leave too much room for us to miss Henry Cavil. There are only so many ways you can say, and fuck. Seriously, there is a scene, I think it's the opening of one of the episodes, where we see this long shot of the landscape, mountains, hills, a river. Then the camera cuts to Geralt standing there, surveying the surroundings, and then it cuts to his point of view. We see the environment through his eyes, and he says, fuck. Fuck. And we keep looking. It cuts to him standing again, and then we see the camp and his companions, and I'm like, what the fuck? The ultimate point of this scene is to show that Geralt is concerned about all the distance he has yet to cross and that he's falling behind. But it is such a weird way to convey it that I don't think another actor would have made much of a difference. Now I should say more about Yennefer and her plot, but let me address the new characters first. Both Regis and Leo Bonhart appear in season 4, and both are played by rather good actors. Let's start with Bonhart. He looks surprisingly lore accurate. In a show where most of the characters look nothing like their original descriptions, Leo Bonhart, in my opinion, looks great. The moment he showed up, I instantly knew who he was, which is nice I suppose, because I remember seeing Kira Metz get killed and being unable to recall which sorceress that was who just died. Also spoilers, I guess, although her death is rather inconsequential. Margarita died too. But back to Leo Bonhart, there is one thing that bothered me a little about his portrayal in the show. So they got the appearance, and the cruelty, and the sadism, and the fighting skills quite right. But they also added a bit of a comically crazy twist to his character, where occasionally he acts like a funny old man and, dances around, which was not the case in the books if I recall correctly. Now I should say that I have only read the later books once, so my remembrance is not that fresh, but I believe he was portrayed in a more serious fashion. I mean, a bit of a chaotic twist is not necessarily bad, and it works well in this season, but if they decide to stay faithful and show the more impactful scenes with him and Ciri in the next season, it may not work out so well. But anyway, I did like him overall. He was arguably the highlight of season 4. He was evil and nasty, and he was passionate about it, and I loved it. Also, every time he spoke, I kept hearing Sleeping Beauty's father. The same actor plays the king in Maleficent. I've watched it with my kids, and he does the exact same accent and voice in general. I kept waiting for him to say, what was it? Bring me the ironworkers.
Bring me the ironworkers.
Okay, next up we have Regis. Now, Regis brings me back decades. Probably around 25 years ago, I was a kid of 10 to 12 years, and my father had brought home the first ever laptop that I had ever seen. And that same evening, he let me watch a movie on it. It was The Matrix. And I absolutely loved it, especially the character of Morpheus.
At last.
I loved his trench coat and his awesome clip-on glasses. I loved the way he fought and spoke. I thought his name was cool, and he was definitely my favorite character. So I have a bit of a soft spot for the actor, but sadly, unlike Leo Bonhart, I don't think Regis turned out so well. The combination of his clothing, hairstyle and beard, and the yellow eyes, all of it just does not fit the general appearance of the actor. And as much as I love Lawrence Fishburne, he looks rather peculiar in the show, and I don't think he is the best choice for the character of Regis. Someone else, perhaps more slender and with sharper features, would have worked better. An actor with East or Southeast European origin might have been an interesting choice. We do have a lot of myths and legends here about either vampires or other similar creatures. Not far from me, for example, here in Bulgaria, they found a medieval skeleton of a person who was stabbed through the heart with a stake, probably burned to death, and his front teeth were pulled out of his mouth. All of which was likely a precaution against that person ever rising from the dead as a vampire. And also, I'm pretty sure one of Regis's names is actually Bulgarian, specifically this one. When he introduces himself on Netflix, he pronounces it as Tertsif or something.
Emil Regis Rohelik, Tertsif Godfrey. Tertsif.
Which is about as far away from the truth as we can get. The name is actually Terziev, ideally spelled with a V instead of double F, and there is a variant of it that has the ski ending as well, Terziski. The name is based on a word which can actually trace its origin way back to Persia. It was introduced in Bulgaria centuries ago by the Ottoman Empire. But back to the show, let us talk about the rats.
Now, you might be wondering, how did they get that name? Well, once they became a gang, someone said, "Oh, you dirty rats!" And they liked it.
Their portrayal is rather different from the books. Not just the way they look, but the way they behave too. In the Rats movie, especially, the whole group has been highly romanticized. In the books, they were not these charming rogues, they were proper bandits. And while they did indeed steal from the rich and gave to the poor, they were doing it mostly for their own benefit and reputation. You know how many stories in the world of The Witcher are essentially twisted versions of classical fairy tales? Well, the rats are a sort of twist on Robin Hood, without all the embellishments. Most members of the group did actually have unfortunate backstories and genuine reasons for being what they are, but nevertheless, they were not nice people, and some of the things they did to Ciri were even less so. Ciri was younger in the books than she is in the show, and Missel essentially forced her to have sex that night. And then Ciri was somewhat pressured into a relationship with her too. Eventually, Ciri did develop feelings for Missel, but whether these feelings were genuine or the result of manipulation, I suppose it's for us to decide when we play The Witcher 3 in the sauna. But back to the Rats film, it is a little boring at first, but once we get to the point where they finally get together with the old Witcher, it becomes watchable. The Witcher himself is not a bad character, and Missel's cursed ex-girlfriend was a cool twist, and the fight between Leo Bonhart and the Witcher was even better. I bet the latter would have won if he wasn't already exhausted from the fight with the monster and surprisingly wounded by Bonhart. That fight was overall so much better than the Witcher who dies in one of the episodes. He basically did nothing in the whole fight against Bonhart. Also, I suppose Netflix is moving away from the yellow eyes for all Witchers. But to wrap up the rats topic, Netflix played it very safe. And a similar claim could actually be made about Milva. In the end of Season 3, I actually liked her light-hearted exchanges with Dandelion and Geralt. I thought it was a nice change of pace. However, her character did not really go much further. And even though Netflix kept her pregnancy and miscarriage in the show, a lot of the heavier stuff surrounding both of these events was either removed or toned down significantly. And as a result, her character ended up rather shallow.
Nothing. I wanted to test the goods.
In some sense, I find it weird because the show clearly does not shy away from showing more explicit stuff when it comes to violence or nudity, for example. There were a handful of scenes that caught me a little off guard, to be honest. One is when Yennefer was interrogating that mage lady. Suddenly her eyes exploded and Yennefer got all covered up in small pieces of her eyeballs. And the other scene I thought was distasteful is when Regis is telling the story of his unfortunate youth. He does it in this smooth and deep voice, which is lovely, but instead of showing Regis, we see this animated footage of the story. And as he talks about losing his ability to control himself, the more he indulged in human blood, they literally show him bending over this vampire lady, which I thought was terribly unsubtle and distasteful, and did not really fit the narration either. So my point is, despite Netflix being quite forward in a visual sense, they actually shy away when it comes to the darker aspects of the story itself. Alright, let's talk about Yennefer's plot. As I mentioned before, the original story has been changed a lot in order to place Yennefer in the driver's seat. Here are a few examples. In the books, it is Francesca who turns Yennefer into a small figurine, not the other way around. Then, instead of all the sorceresses agreeing to follow and join Yennefer in her quest, it is basically the opposite. Most of them do not like Yennefer, they don't trust her, and they have other plans for Ciri and Vilgefortz, which actually causes Yennefer to abandon the lodge and work alone. Even her dear friend Triss sides with Philippa, which is part of the reason why some people dislike Triss. And as for Philippa, she is the one who forms and leads the lodge, and their goals are rather selfish. The sorceresses have had enough of kings and men in general, and they want to be in control themselves. They wish to place one of their kind on the throne, hoping that that might be Ciri, and so on. But on Netflix, Yennefer is at the forefront of everything. And honestly, ever since Season 2, she has felt a lot more like the main character of the story, which I think is unfortunate for Geralt. The battle between Vilgefortz and the Lodge never really happens in the books, but it is arguably the climax of Season 4, and there are some things about it which I did enjoy. I thought Vilgefortz draining the life of his fellow mages to maintain the portal disabling spell was a nice touch. A lot better than what Aretuza was doing, if you recall the ridiculous business where they turned the failed students into eel batteries to power up the school. And by the way, how the hell did Vilgefortz amass such an army? He literally had dozens of evil mages on his side. At least it made for a large battle. I was also excited to see the Witchers. In the books, they never make another appearance after the early stages. Sadly, Vesemir was mostly there to get killed by Vilgefortz. He was also played by another actor. Speaking of dying, Istrid also had to sacrifice himself, so Netflix has killed off quite a few characters who survive in the books, which is probably their way of wrapping things up, preparing for the end, which has got to be next season, right? Also, watching arguably the most powerful sorceress struggle to push something heavy with her thin body without ever trying to use magic was a little painful. Another thing I wasn't a fan of was that after the portals were enabled, Yennefer proceeds to teleport in the middle of Emir's castle, right next to his chambers, so she can grab Ciri, and I'm like, oh come on. There is no way the freaking Emperor of Nilfgaard hasn't taken any precautions against such a possibility. I mean, I criticized Rience, who did the exact same thing. He randomly teleported in the middle of Kaer Morhen to steal Ciri's blood, I believe. But here it's even worse. Right, what else should I complain about? Many people, the rats especially, often spoke in a way that's not very fitting for a medieval setting. They would say things like, "That shit was mental."
That shit was mental!
And there was a similar issue with the clothing too, where some of it looked too modern. Geralt's jacket and the jacket of one of the rats come to mind. Yennefer also had these leather pants and leather cropped top, and so on. What else do we have? Oh, Radovid's love story with Dandelion. I'm not sure where they were going with it. Every time they showed Radovid, he was always broken-hearted and depressed. And it seemed to be, to a large extent, because he and Dandelion had parted on bad terms. But then halfway into the season they finally meet, and immediately get into a fight and everything falls apart, and that's it. There were a couple of cool new monsters. The Rusalka, while not very similar looking to our East European idea of it, was a rather memorable encounter. The Wraith in the graveyard had some awkward moments with Milva and Dandelion, but the Wraith itself and the use of the Yrden sign was very much in the spirit of The Witcher 3, and I liked it. Maybe it was a little fanboyish of me, but still. And what was that monster that suddenly showed up at the end, in the battle for the bridge? I think it wasn't in the books. At first, I thought it was a Draug, like in The Witcher 2, maybe risen from one of the spirits of the fallen commanders, but I'm not sure. I wasn't a huge fan of Queen Meve. I suppose I refuse to imagine her as anything other than the way she is in Thronebreaker. I love her character in that game. And since this is how the season ends, perhaps I should be wrapping the video up too. I haven't talked about Stefan Skellen, Zoltan, Yarpen and Cahir. Cahir was alright, he did not have too much to do, but he has always been one of the more likable characters for me. And the same goes for Yarpen actually. Despite not having much screen time, his scenes have always been among the memorable ones. Now, Zoltan was a more questionable case. The man who plays him is a talented actor, but due to his advanced age and physical condition, he seemed a little out of place at times, usually in combat. By contrast, Yarpen was much better in that regard. And as for Stefan Skellen, like Leo Bonhart, he may turn out to be good, and I hope to be talking more about him in the next season. With that, I believe we're done. I cannot hide the fact that over the years my interest in the Netflix Witcher series has waned dramatically, and unfortunately season 4 hasn't done much to restore my faith. But to finish the journey, I will watch the final season 2 and share my thoughts on it when it comes out. On that note, I should thank you all for watching. Special thanks to my supporters and YouTube members. Do tell me what you thought of season 4 and everything I talked about. And until the next video, stay tuned and be good.
Triss? Yennefer, perchance? Couple times. Her and the Wild Hunt. Oh.